Was this man a part of some twisted religion? I carefully made my way around him. He remained in the same position, appearing to not show any indication of my presence, yet I still wasn't taking any chances, and when I finally reached a good angle to see his face, my heart dropped. He was wearing a pale white mask over his face. The mask was glossy. The eye holes were wide open along with the mouth, both completely veiled in black. It gave off an eerie chill. It was as if the mask itself was frozen in fear, emitting an ear-splitting scream for its life. We all just remained still with what felt like a long hour, and finally my dad managed to mutter a question to the man, asking him why he was doing this. The man, of course, remained silent, ignoring the question. My mother was still whimpering to herself, while my dad kept his head low, applying pressure to the wound on his head. He repeated his question with more anger in his tone. The man finally made a move. Taking out a second pistol from within his robes with his other hand, he raised and pointed it in my direction. My heart began rapidly pounding in my chest, more than it had before. Could this man finally see me? Was he always able to? And I raised my hand up in a surrender pose while backing up a little, and when I did, I realized the angle of the gun was slightly off. He was pointing it in my direction, but not at me exactly. I turned my head to see what he was in fact pointing the gun at. The young lady. My mother let out a loud shriek, and the man had the gun in the direction of my 1-year-old self. Of course, being 1 year old, I didn't seem bothered by the gun. In fact, I was still playing around with a book from earlier, oblivious to the whole situation. What was the man planning? Why did he break in to begin with? He clearly didn't want anything from my parents. They didn't have anything expensive at the time. And more importantly, why was he pointing a gun at a 1-year-old child? My heart dropped even further when I heard him cock the gun. What reason would he have for doing this? What would it accomplish? My mother attempted to move towards me, but the man refocused his gun on her, cocking that weapon as well. I looked back at my younger self, who in turn looked up at the man, getting a blank, innocent stare. The man appeared unfazed, solid in stance. I could see his fingers slowly squeezing back on the hammer, heart still racing. I quickly moved in the path of the gun, hoping to obscure his view. Realizing it wouldn't make a difference, I grabbed the gun, but my hand phased through it like before. I couldn't touch him. His fingers gradually continued to squeeze back on the trigger. It was like viewing the moment in slow motion, taking forever to occur. Unexpectedly, I felt my mind being flooded with images. They were images of people. They looked to be people I knew throughout my life, almost like a photo album. Endless images of moments and faces flashed by, and I saw my mother, my father, my friends that I had known, girlfriends I had relationships with, everyone. They continued appearing one after another, and as they did, I felt a pulsing pain grow in my head. I couldn't take all the images at once. It was too much, and yet they persisted. I found myself on my knees as the images began appearing at a faster rate. I was now gripping my head, almost shaking uncontrollably until they ceased without warning. The air felt cold. The warm colors around transitioned literally to a grayscale-like color. I looked up slowly, and when I did, I saw the flash of the barrel go off, followed by the sound of a loud bang. I turned around to find the lifeless body of my younger self lying on his back, a pool of blood quickly forming around him. The air was silent. My parents were speechless. Frozen in grief, the man lowered his gun, eventually letting it drop to the ground. We all remained silent and completely still. He proceeded to lift his hand, removing his hood. Afterward, he slowly removed the mask from his face. My eyes couldn't comprehend what they viewed. This man, this murdering, psychopathic, religious nutcase's face was my face. He had the same face as me, the current age me. Tears formed in his eyes and slowly made their way down his face. He turned to my parents. A small smile formed across his face. It wasn't a twisted, evil smile or satisfied one, no. His smile and his eyes held a deep sense of sympathy. With it, he spoke quivering words. I'm sorry. I had to. I did you a favor. Forgive me. Without warning, a blinding white light appeared out of nowhere, completely engulfing me, and I saw a face appearing amidst the white. And before I could make it out, I immediately jolted awake by the alarm on my cell phone. I sat up quickly. The dream was still burning in my mind with every excruciating detail. When I looked down at my hands, I found them trembling. I put them to my sweaty chest to feel my heart knocking around uncontrollably to no end. What the hell kind of dream was that? After the dream, I couldn't fall back asleep again, or actually, I didn't want to. It was just so disturbing. And more importantly, too realistic. Lucky for me, it hadn't been too early in the morning. Soon my parents would wake up as well. That thought comforted me a little. I didn't want to be alone. As expected, I could soon hear my stepmother's adhering to her promise, cooking that large breakfast upstairs. Before heading up, I made sure to compose myself in the best manner possible. I didn't want them questioning me about the ordeal. It was just a dream. I wanted to prevent any reason to call it, at least not at that moment. It's too soon. I ascended the stairs, made my way to the kitchen where I was greeted happily. I, of course, lied about how I slept. We ate breakfast silently for the most part. Luckily, they were deeply involved with the Sunday paper, or they were on their tablets. After eating, I thanked them for the meal. I promised I'd visit more often. I wanted to leave as quickly as possible, so I told them I had to leave early to prepare for work the next day. Packed up my things, said my goodbyes before entering my car. Meditating on that incident really helped me wrap my mind around it. Helped me realize that it was just that. A dream. There's no deeper meaning to it other than my mind conjuring up a freakish set of images based off what I had seen prior to. As time went on, the images began acting more like a dream. I said I'd never forget it, and yet, like the typical ones, it slowly was slipping away from me. I was ready to head back. Before I could turn my car on, my phone went off. On the other end was my boss. He asked me how I was doing, if I was willing to do an extended on-site service for a client, possibly for a week or two, depending on the number of computers. The project involved establishing networks and accounts. Mentioned the client would provide room and meals. Seeing nothing wrong with getting out of the office for a while, I agreed. I asked who the client was. He told me it would be a service provided by an independent church. To be continued. I was particularly excited about this on-site job. Later on that evening, my boss called again and filled me in on more details about the request. He told me that traveling to the church would be quite a drive, and that its location was on the countryside, secluded from most towns. He gave me strict instructions to abide by their basic rules and to not offend them by any means. And apparently they paid handsomely for the service, and he wanted to be sure our company kept every dime. He did note that I only had to respect their rules and not necessarily buy into any of their religious activities or anything. He told me to stop at the office in the morning for the necessary equipment. He promised that the company would reimburse me with the cost of travel and reminded me to call daily with any updates. I wasn't a big fan of religion, but I wasn't going to complain if they were providing food and room for sleeping. Again, it was a chance to get out of the office for a couple of days, and that night I quickly packed up enough items for 2 weeks in this big suitcase. After preloading my car, I set my alarm early, knowing that I would need to compensate for the drive. It was strange. My night was dreamless, and it was quick. Felt like I had closed my eyes for a second before I heard my alarm go off for the next day. What struck me even odder was the fact that I couldn't recall what had stirred me up the night before. I had a disturbing dream when visiting my parents, that much I knew, but of what specifically evaded my memory. I dismissed the thought, believing that it would just be for the best. Despite being tired from the early rise, I was up without a struggle and ready to embark. The outside air was cooler than I usually preferred. The sky was starless, almost like a dark veil across it. I hopped in my car and I kept the window up this time, the heat at full blast. A few times my eyes rolled back from the tiredness, but the radio kept that temptation at bay. I made the quick stop by the office to gather up all the necessary equipment needed for the job. My boss already had it packed and ready to be loaded upon my arrival. He wasn't there himself, but with the help from the third shift crew, I was able to load everything into my trunk. Afterward, they provided me with a set of GPS directions provided by my boss. Once I thanked the crew for helping, I made my way on the road. The further I drove, the more scarce the streetlights and other cars became. Before long, the sun had fully emerged, giving sight to the endless oceans of green pastures and cornfields. Eventually, though, even the pastures came to an end. And soon, I found myself swallowed by the dense patches of trees. My car barely managed to remain on the thin, rough path. Below, I could hear rocks and twigs crunching under the wheels. I held my breath a few times, slowing my vehicle down, hoping to not incur a flat tire, which was the last thing I needed. After what felt like ages, I finally came across a fairly large building ahead. The building itself was an old structure, standing tall and stretched far back into the wood. Its appearance was withered, made of old wood, pale and decayed. It swayed a few times at the course of the wind, letting off a more disturbing groan as if suffering, wishing to be put out of its misery. Truly, it was amazing that such a building hadn't already collapsed. Continuing to approach, I could make out more of its structure. The building appeared to be 2 stories. Its front was rather plain aside from the monotonous row of windows, a row of 3 that ran across the second floor. The windows themselves were elongated, running along the sides of the building as well. I was thrown off by the sight of the structure. I was sure my boss had informed me that this was to be a church. I wasn't much of a churchgoer, but that building before me looked like an old warehouse or boarding home rather than a place of worship. The rugged path led up to its entrance. In the front of a set of double doors, I could see a lone figure standing, waiting for my approach. It was an elderly man in his mid-50s in a gray suit and black tie. He immediately made his way to me when I parked. His walk was hobbled, but elegant in poise. A little hesitant, I gradually let down my window, greeted by his big toothy smile. "Afternoon, son," he said with a strong country accent. "You're that technician we've been waiting for." I was taken back by his overpowering cologne. It smelled like a poor concoction of baby powder and sunflower seeds. He was balding towards the top of his head, while his snowy white hair grew around the edges like a crescent. Deep wrinkles were pressed across his face and seemed to grow in number when he smiled. I slightly stuttered and answered, Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Pleased to meet you." "There's no need to be shy, son. I'm Reverend Gary Gooding. You can call me Gary. Welcome to Peach Herb County," he said, extending out a hand. Nervously, I shook it.